Archaeologists have a really cool job, but also quite a daunting one. With all the time human beings have been on this earth, most of those years being violent and tumultuous, there are a good number of objects that have a pretty dark history behind them. So let's talk about them. We're gonna start off the list with Mummy Juanita. If there's anything in the world that is likely cursed, it's gotta be mummies. And I don't even care if curses are real. Mummies, they're creepy as hell anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So back in 1995, on a casual day of mummy hunting, as one does, anthropologist Johann Reinhardt and his gang stumbled upon something pretty mind-blowing on Mount Ampato in the Andes Mountains of Peru. Enter Mummy Juanita, also known as the Ice Maiden or Lady of Ampato. Juanita was a teenage Inca girl making her way to about 14 years old before meeting her unfortunate end. The crazy part was that this discovery was accidental. Reinhardt and his crew were on a mission to find another Inca mummy when, whoopsie daisy, they stumbled upon Juanita in a crevice at a whopping 20,600 feet above sea level. Quite the surprise. She was wrapped up in layers of vibrant textiles, lying there with all kinds of goodies around her, ceramics, metals, food, even tiny statues. All of these extra items she was adorned with made it pretty likely that she had been sacrificed, likely to the gods. Next on the list is the Screaming Mummy. Yeah, if you thought your regular old mummy was unsettling, how about one who died in pain and terror with a face eternally stuck in a scream? That is the Screaming Mummy, also known as Man-E. This mummy was discovered in 1886 by Gaston Maspero, the head of the Egyptian Antiques Service. Man-E didn't seem to go through your typical mummification ritual. For one, his internal organs hadn't been removed, and his hands and feet were bound. So that combined with his terrified expression meant it was pretty likely this guy had been buried alive, which is absolutely horrifying. That's one of my worst fears. At the very least though, he'd been in pain when he died. So is this mummy cursed? Let's just say I'd be far more surprised to discover that it wasn't. Next we have a story about a disturbing music box. This story was shared to Reddit by Majestic Park, who talked about a music box her ex-boyfriend had that was passed down to him from his grandmother after she passed away. Majestic Park talked about how off the thing made them feel. They couldn't even play the thing and tried to stay away from it as much as possible. It just had a bad vibe about it. They went on to write, "The boyfriend moved out of the house, and when he left, I put all the things he left behind out in the storeroom, including the music box. I had hell after that. I had health problems. Both of my dogs got cancer and had to be put down. My car constantly broke down. My mother took ill and died. A mentally ill neighbor started stalking and harassing me, and I was constantly at odds with my friends and coworkers. Plus, I started having money problems. Finally, I decided to move and get rid of all the old boyfriend's things. I threw that effing music box in the back of my pickup with all the other stuff and hauled it to the dump. I have no idea if it had anything to do with getting rid of the music box. My life started to even out and got better. I was able to get a new car. I got another boyfriend, I bought a house, and my troubles with my friends and coworkers started to subside. The crazy neighbor was sent to a treatment hospital, and a friend gave me a wonderful dog. I had a good run of about 10 years before anything else bad happened to me." Next on the list is the Cursed Spearpoint. So another Redditor talked about an artifact that may have been responsible for some bad stuff as soon as they found it. User Grok23 wrote, "I found a spear point in a really old medicine wheel here in Wyoming. I took it and instantly got bad vibes. A lot of creepy happened until I returned it. Don't mess with native sacred sites." And that's where the post ends. So then someone else asked them what creepy stuff happened. So Grok23 continued with, "On the way home, my motorcycle's tire blew up and threw me off, and I almost stabbed myself on the spearhead. Obsidian, so pretty sharp. That night, I kept hearing banging noises on my wall and had sleep paralysis where I saw some shadow figures. The next day, I apologized and placed it back in the medicine wheel, which looked like this." And he attached this image here. Yeah, that is actually a lot of stuff to happen in a very short span of time. I'd be getting rid of that thing too. We're back to mummies again, this time with what has been dubbed the Scottish Frankenstein mummies. So in 2001, archaeologists were doing a dig in a Bronze Age settlement in Scotland where they dug up a pair of 3,000-year-old skeletons. One was male, the other was female. They'd fully decomposed at this point and were just skeletons, but the team performed tests on the bones and discovered that they had been intentionally preserved initially. This was pretty cool on its own because intentional mummification in Europe was rare. But the creepy part comes next. Turned out that each of these skeletons were cobbled together like Frankenstein-style creations. The male skeleton had parts belonging to 3 different men. A torso from one, a skull and neck from another, and a lower jaw from some other guy. And the female actually had a male skull, a female torso, and the arm of somebody else. Until this day, researchers don't know why these bones were pieced together like that. Next we have the knife-handed skeleton. Alright, I'm not actually sure if this next thing is cursed, but it's so damn cool, I couldn't help but throw it on the list. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it brought some bad luck. What did folks in the medieval times do when they had a limb lobbed off in battle? Well, most of them just died. Some of you may be shocked by this, but folks back then didn't have quite the same quality of medical care that we do now. Apparently people wouldn't always die though after having their hand detached from their arm with the help of a battle axe. In the early 90s, Italian archaeologists dug up a male skeleton with a missing right forearm, and to compensate, he attached a knife to his forearm with some sort of medieval style prosthesis, likely made of buckles and straps. You see, the teeth on the right side of his mouth were super worn down, meaning he was most likely tightening the prosthesis with his teeth, you know, kind of like going like that. Now, of course, people are sometimes born missing limbs, but that was not the case here. Researchers made a 3D model of his right arm with a CT scan and discovered that there had been severe blunt force trauma to his forearm. So this guy had his forearm removed, survived the procedure in a time where medical care was a total joke, and then attached a blade to his arm to keep fighting another day. Someone needs to make a movie about this guy. Next on the list, we have the Cursed Stele. This is an ancient artifact that comes in 2 parts. So back in 1879, one half was in Syria, but today it sits in the British Museum. The other half went on a different adventure, landing at the Bonhams auction house in London. Now, the British Museum had a shot at reuniting these 2 long-lost halves in 2014, but they decided against it. And why was that? Well, there were 2 reasons. For one, it was a bit of a mystery as to how the lower half, up for grabs at the auction, left Syria. All we know is that it supposedly passed from father to son in the 60s. Cue the suspicious side-eye and conspiracy theories about it being swiped from its home country. And secondly, there's the curse. The inscription on the artifact, when translated to English, is a warning that reads, "Whoever discards this image from the presence of Salmanu puts it into another place, whether he throws it into water or covers it with earth or brings and places it into a taboo house where it is inaccessible. May the god Salmanu, the great lord, overthrow his sovereignty. May his name and his seed disappear into the land. May he live in a contingent together with the slave woman of his land." So housing it in a British museum certainly counts as putting it into another place. So they opted not to purchase the second half, perhaps partly in fear of angering Salmanu even further. The Terracotta Army. In 1974, a group of farmers in China stumbled on something big while digging a well. They found this massive pit filled with thousands of life-size clay soldiers, horses, and chariots. These clay soldiers were made over 2,000 years ago to guard the tomb of China's first emperor. The emperor wanted an army to follow him into the afterlife, so his followers made this incredible army out of clay, and each soldier was unique, with different faces, hairstyles, and even uniforms. It's incredibly impressive to look at, even just in pictures. But back to the curse part, some people claim that disturbing the emperor's tomb, which probably includes finding and digging up the Terracotta Army, brings bad luck. And the farmers who discovered it in '74 had a pretty tough time afterward. First off, their village got moved because of all the fuss about the discovery, and then a bunch of the farmers faced hardships like illness and financial troubles. Now we move on to a cursed mirror known as the Dark Mirror. It's said that this scrying mirror, which is now housed in the Traveling Museum of Paranormal and Occult, shows disturbing visions when you gaze into it. The most common thing people see is their own corpse staring right back at them. People have also reported seeing themselves rapidly aged. Some have seen their reflection move on its own, like winking or smiling at them. Or sometimes people's reflection will just vanish altogether. A man donated the mirror to the museum after buying it at a Columbus area psychic fair. As soon as he took the thing home, he started experiencing some disturbing stuff, i.e., every time he looked at the mirror, things just looked off, almost like the mirror was conjuring up his deepest, darkest fears and taunting him with them. Suffice to say, he didn't want the thing in his house anymore. Finally, though, we have the Hope Diamond. So this blue gem is currently housed at the National Museum of Natural History in DC, but its journey has been pretty dramatic, to say the least. Legend has it that this diamond was taken from an Indian idol. After that, anyone who had their hands on the thing was in for a wild ride of misfortune and tragedy. Like King Louis XIV and Mary Antoinette, two big names in history who each had their fair share of drama and both possessed the Hope Diamond at one point in their lives. In 1839, a guy named Henry Thomas Hope dropped a large sum of money on the diamond, slapped his name on it, and then died. Then his family sold the gem to settle some gambling debts. After that comes jeweler Wilhelm Falls. He snags the diamond, and then his very own son takes him out. In the early 1900s, Evelyn Walsh McLean took the stage. Her kids kicked the bucket prematurely, then her husband left her, and he ended up taking his life not long afterward. And we're gonna end it on that dark note. I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.